In the dawn of civilization, when mighty empires etched their legacies in stone and the very earth, where Babylon's famed hanging gardens reached for the heavens and its towering ziggurats seemed to spear the clouds with an aspiration for eternity, a profound and unprecedented experiment in human history was quietly taking shape. Amidst cultures that venerated golden deities and offered their children to fiery furnaces, a single voice emerged, poised to ignite a revolution that would transcend the lifespan of every throne, every temple, and every civilization, however seemingly eternal as the very mountains. From the temple-adorned cities of Mesopotamia, where ziggurats ascended like fingers grasping towards the divine, to the contested hills of Canaan, through the trials of Egyptian servitude and the arduous wilderness wanderings, across epochs of conquest and periods of captivity, a singular thread winds through the vast tapestry of millennia, the saga of ancient Israel's emergence and eventual decline. This is the chronicle of humble shepherds elevated to kingship, of individuals once enslaved who dismantled powerful empires, and of a people who, despite losing virtually everything, preserved an essence that no earthly weapon could ever obliterate, navigating both the splendor of palaces and the starkness of caves, enduring triumph and exile alike. Their sacred covenant with the unseen would fundamentally reshape not only their own destiny, but also the very spiritual architecture of the world beyond the great Mesopotamian rivers. A world forged in bronze unfolds beneath a relentless sun. Across the Fertile Crescent, city-states rise and crumble in an endless cycle. Babylon, with its legendary hanging gardens, presides over the land of the Chaldeans, where merchants meticulously tally their silver and priests meticulously interpret omens from the flight of birds. Within this intricate mosaic of nations, Canaan rests like a precious jewel, strategically positioned between burgeoning empires. Its coastal plains shimmer with the emerald hues of grain fields, and its rolling hills are draped in the rich purples of ripening vineyards. Here, Amorite rulers govern from their formidable, fortified cities, while Egyptian caravans traverse the winding mountain passes. It is among these ancient peoples, whose pantheons reside in temples of hewn stone, that a solitary voice will arise to instigate a revolution that will redefine the spiritual landscape of humanity. From a ziggurat crowned with sacred structures, a voice, resonant as thunder, speaks directly into the heart of one man, commanding him to forsake his homeland, his kin, and his father's house, and to journey towards a land he has yet to see. Abraham, known in those distant days as Abram, heeds words that slice through the clamor of commerce and ritual with the sharpness of a bronze blade cutting through silk. As Abram gathers his household and turns his gaze toward the setting sun, he carries with him far more than mere silver and livestock. He bears the nascent seed of a sacred pledge, destined to flourish into a mighty tree whose branches will offer shelter to myriad nations. This caravan of destiny journeys westward, passing the great bend of the Euphrates, where the merchants of Haran meticulously track their fortunes. It is here, amidst the quietude of this region, that death might claim the fearful, but also where the divine compact begins to solidify. The Almighty promises to elevate him into a preeminent nation, to bestow blessings upon him, and to magnify his name, decreeing that all the families of the earth shall find blessing through him. Three fundamental elements forge the golden chain of this pact: a land flowing with sustenance, offspring as numerous as the countless stars adorning the celestial vault, and a divine favor that will cascade through this chosen lineage to touch every kindred under the sun's unwavering gaze. The patriarch enters Canaan's embrace, arriving like the dawn breaking over hills that have long slumbered through ages of hardship. At Shechem, the celestial decree takes tangible form. As the Almighty declares his intention to grant this territory to Abram's descendants, an altar is erected beneath ancient oaks, marking the very first footprint of faith upon soil that will, in time, be consecrated by the blood of martyrs. Abraham's path meanders southward through the undulating hill country. He passes Jerusalem, where Melchizedek reigns as both priest and king, the sovereign of the Most High God. This enigmatic figure emerges from the city gates, bearing offerings of bread and wine, and bestows his blessing upon the patriarch, recognizing him as favored by the Creator of all that exists, both in the heavens and on the earth. When Abraham faithfully renders a tenth of all his possessions to this priest of Salem, he establishes enduring precedents that will resonate long after his earthly remains find rest within the cave of Machpelah. Years drift by like grains of sand through an hourglass, while the patriarch's household journeys between the southern frontiers and the imposing walls of Damascus. Sarah, despite celestial assurances that her womb would bring forth nations, remains barren. Yet, when divine messengers manifest themselves beneath the venerable oaks of Mamre, announcing that the aged Sarah will indeed bear the destined child, the celestial realms echo with laughter, mingling with the profound astonishment of earthbound observers. Isaac, whose very name signifies laughter, enters the world, embodying within his identity the profound joy of impossibly fulfilled vows. Upon the heights of Moriah, where the future temple of Jerusalem will one day crown the mount with cedar and gold, Abraham confronts the ultimate trial of faith. The divine command pierces deeper than any bronze weapon, demanding the sacrifice of his beloved son as a burnt offering. At the summit of Moriah, divine intervention stays the patriarch's hand, at the very moment steel hovers above Isaac's throat. A ram, its horns ensnared in the embrace of a thicket, meets its end in the boy's stead, while the divine voice solemnly reaffirms the sacred covenants. Isaac matures, bearing the unmistakable mark of miraculous birth. At the wells of Beersheba, he finds his bride in Rebekah, a comely maiden brought from the distant plains of Mesopotamia. Twin sons contend within Rebekah's womb, even before their birth, foreshadowing the complex conflicts that will shape unborn nations. Esau emerges first, a figure of ruddy hue and covered in hair, closely followed by Jacob, who emerges grasping his twin's heel, as if instinctively reaching for blessings that were not rightfully his. At Beersheba, where the whispering desert winds carry secrets as ancient as time itself, Jacob receives his grandfather's inheritance through a transformative vision, rendering a simple stone pillow into a celestial gateway between earth and heaven. Angels ascend and descend the ethereal ladder, as the divine voice reiterates the sacred covenant with renewed authority. For 2 decades, Jacob toils in Mesopotamia, undergoing lessons that no paternal instruction could ever impart. 11 sons and a single daughter are born from his loins during these years of exile, children whose descendants will ultimately form the very tribes bearing their names. At the ford of the Jabbok, Jacob encounters a formidable adversary in a supernatural struggle, a confrontation that transforms him from a supplicant into a prince. Throughout the entire night, he wrestles with a figure whose true nature remains shrouded in an impenetrable veil of mystery. As dawn's first light illuminates the eastern hills, the celestial wrestler bestows upon him a new name, declaring him no longer Jacob, but one who has contended with God and emerged victorious. Among Jacob's 12 sons, Joseph distinguishes himself with a remarkable favor, igniting within his siblings a jealousy that burns with murderous intensity. Dreams of sheaves and celestial bodies bowing before his dominion strike their hearts like poisoned arrows. When an opportune moment arises in the fields of Dothan, they unceremoniously sell him to Ishmaelite traders, destined for the bustling markets of Egypt. Thus, this son of destiny descends into the depths of servitude, his tunic of many colors torn and stained with blood to deceive their grieving father. Yet, even through human malevolence, divine providence operates, much like light refracting through crystal. Within the household of Potiphar, Joseph's faithful service elevates him to the position of overseer. When his master's wife attempts to ensnare him with seduction, the young Hebrew prioritizes integrity over personal advancement. His unwavering refusal fuels her rage, leading to a false accusation that results in his imprisonment in Pharaoh's dungeons. Even within the confines of his cell, divine favor envelops Joseph, as constant as the morning dew. When Pharaoh's cupbearer and chief baker share unsettling visions, Joseph skillfully unlocks their meanings, guided by celestial wisdom. 2 years later, as troubling dreams plague the ruler of Egypt, manifesting as visions of both plump and emaciated cattle, no court magician can decipher their significance until the butler recalls the Hebrew prisoner. Standing before Pharaoh, clad in borrowed robes, Joseph interprets the royal dreams with an authority that emanates directly from heaven's throne room. 7 years of unparalleled abundance are destined to be followed by 7 years of famine so devastating that the memory of prosperity will be utterly consumed. At the age of 30, Joseph departs from Memphis, riding in Pharaoh's second chariot, preceded by heralds proclaiming his authority. From the verdant fields of the Delta to the rugged cataracts of the Nile, all of Egypt bows before this astute administrator, whose wisdom preserves their nation from utter starvation. As the famine spreads its grip across the ancient Near East, only Egypt possesses ample provisions. From the hills of Canaan, where Jacob's flocks dwindle in number, 10 of his sons embark on a southward journey to procure grain. Only Benjamin remains behind, sheltered by his father's profound affection from the perils that had claimed Rachel's firstborn. After subjecting them to tests of their character through imprisonment and accusations, and after Judah offers himself as a substitute to ensure Benjamin's safety, Joseph can no longer conceal his identity. The revelation of his presence erupts like thunder as he declares himself, and anxiously inquires if his father still draws breath. The divine calculus, transforming human wickedness into providential preservation, underscores his explanation. God, he reveals, sent him ahead to safeguard lives during the ensuing famine. Pharaoh's elation at this astounding revelation surpasses even the astonishment of the reunited family. Royal provisions are dispatched in the form of carts for their journey, and generous gifts are bestowed. News, defying all belief, speeds across Canaan's hills. Joseph lives and governs all of Egypt. Upon witnessing the royal carts laden with provisions, the aged patriarch's spirit is revitalized at the wells of Beersheba. Jacob offers sacrifices, seeking divine guidance for their path forward. In visions that manifest during the night, the divine voice conveys words of profound reassurance. 70 souls descend into the borders of Egypt: Jacob, his sons, their wives, and their children, the entirety of the sacred household carrying their ancestral inheritance into foreign soil. At the frontiers of Goshen, father and son embrace, and 22 years of separation dissolve like morning mist. When Jacob's life finally reaches its end, his funeral procession rivals that of royalty, journeying from Goshen to Hebron, conveying the patriarch to his final resting place beside Abraham and Sarah in the purchased cave of Machpelah. Joseph's own passing, at the venerable age of 110 years, marks the conclusion of an era during which the covenant inheritance found secure refuge under Pharaoh's protective authority. However, the inexorable passage of time brings about profound changes in the land of the Nile. A new sovereign ascends the throne, one who has no recollection of Joseph, nor of the Hebrew administrator who so capably saved the nation from the ravages of famine. This pharaoh regards the burgeoning descendants of Jacob, now numbering in the hundreds of thousands, not as grateful guests, but as potential threats to his dominion. The new regime imposes strenuous labor upon Abraham's lineage, compelling them to construct vast treasure cities, their bricks fashioned from the mud and straw of the Delta. Yet, the more fervently they attempt to suppress the Hebrew populace, the more they flourish and multiply. When forced labor proves insufficient to contain their growth, Pharaoh issues a chilling decree. All male Hebrew infants are to be put to death at birth by the midwives. Finally, in a state of desperate measures, he promulgates an edict. Every newborn boy must be cast into the Nile. Into this suffocating darkness, a child emerges whose very survival defies the royal decree. When Amram, from the lineage of Levi, takes Jochebed as his wife, their union yields a son of such extraordinary beauty that his mother conceals him for 3 months, unwilling to surrender him to the hungry embrace of the Nile's waters. When concealment becomes no longer feasible, faith manifests in the form of a skillfully woven, waterproofed basket crafted from bulrushes. Amidst the sheltering reeds, where Pharaoh's daughter seeks refreshment, the infant floats like hope personified, carried upon the very waters of destruction. Upon discovering the crying infant, the princess's heart is stirred with profound compassion, transcending any political boundaries. Moses, a name signifying drawn out, is nurtured within Pharaoh's own household, granted access to the finest education, yet never forgetting the suffering endured by his people. Upon reaching manhood, righteous indignation ignites within Moses' heart, consuming all caution. His bronze weapon finds its mark in the flesh of an overseer. The earth drinks blood, while the desert wind scatters sand over the remnants of an act of liberation that has tragically devolved into murder. Driven by fear, Moses flees the only home he has ever known, seeking refuge in the wilderness, where his royal upbringing proves utterly irrelevant. At a well in Midian, Moses discovers a profound sense of purpose in protecting others and a deep meaning in service. His timely intervention earns him gratitude, which blossoms into marriage with Zipporah. For 40 years, he tends flocks in the desolate expanses of the wilderness, a place where profound silence imparts lessons that no palace education could ever convey. On the slopes of Horeb, divine fire blazes within a thorn bush, a spectacle of burning yet unconsumed life. From within these flames, a voice emerges, poised to reshape history and transform a fugitive shepherd into the most formidable deliverer the covenant people would ever know. The commission, demanding a level of faith that Moses initially felt he lacked, is met with divine assurance. Upon their deliverance from bondage, the people will offer worship to God on this very mountain. Moses journeys back towards the land of the Nile, accompanied by his wife and sons, his hand firmly grasping a shepherd's staff. This humble instrument has been transformed by heaven into an implement of both wonder and judgment. Aaron meets him at the mountain of God, and together the siblings approach their enslaved kinsmen with tidings so extraordinary they are almost beyond belief. The Almighty has heard their sorrowful cries and has remembered his sacred covenants with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Before Pharaoh's imposing throne, Moses delivers heaven's unequivocal ultimatum. The message resonates with absolute clarity and unwavering resolve. The God of the Hebrews demands the release of his people for the purpose of wilderness worship. However, the monarch's response starkly reveals the profound depths of Egyptian arrogance and the vast expanse of human defiance against celestial authority. What ensues challenges every conceivable assumption about divine power and human pride, as 10 devastating plagues descend upon Egypt like relentless hammer, blows upon an anvil that refuses to yield. Waters transform into blood, swarms of frogs emerge, and gnats rise from the very dust. Flies invade the land, yet Goshen remains untouched. Livestock perish, painful boils erupt. Hail falls like stones, accompanied by fire that runs along the ground, and locusts consume whatever the hail has spared. Following this, a darkness so profound it can be felt blankets the land for 3 days, while the Hebrews reside within its absence, surrounded by light. However, the 10th plague proves distinct, striking not at comfort, but at the very core of human love. Moses declares that at approximately midnight, death will claim every firstborn son, from Pharaoh's own heir to the child of the humblest slave girl. On the 14th day of the first month, the Hebrews prepare for their deliverance, utilizing the blood of a lamb. Each household selects an unblemished male lamb, 1 year of age. At twilight, the heads of each family collect the blood and apply it to the door frames, the side posts, and the lintels. Subsequently, they roast the meat over a fire and consume it, accompanied by bitter herbs and unleavened bread. The blood is to serve as a sign, and when the destroying angel beholds the blood, he will pass over their dwellings. At the stroke of midnight, as the angel of death moves through Egypt with the swiftness of judgment-empowered wings, death enters every habitation devoid of the blood-marked doorframe. From Pharaoh's opulent palace to the deepest dungeon, the firstborn draw their last breath, and the laments of families rise like the fragrant incense of grief. Throughout the entire land, no house remains untouched by death, save for those in Goshen, where the blood of the Lamb has purchased life. The king, who had repeatedly defied heaven's solemn warnings, now summons Moses and Aaron in the oppressive darkness of that terrible night. He commands them to depart immediately with their entire populace, to take their flocks and herds as they requested, and to worship their God. From Ramesses, 600,000 men on foot march forth, accompanied by women and children, carrying dough unrisen due to their haste, and bearing treasures pressed upon them by neighbors eager to see them gone. They travel eastward toward the wilderness, guided by a pillar of cloud that shields them from the desert sun by day and transforms into a pillar of fire to illuminate their path by night. At Pi-hahiroth, situated between Migdol and the sea, the covenant people find themselves trapped, caught between Pharaoh's advancing army and waters too deep to ford. But Moses lifts his staff over the waters that have never known division, and heaven displays its power, reducing human engineering to mere child's play. Throughout the entire night, an east wind blows, and divine intervention pushes back the sea, causing it to stand like formidable walls on either side of a pathway paved with the ocean floor. As morning light reveals the parted sea to the eyes of the Egyptians, their chariot wheels find only sand where water should have been. Into the very corridor that had served as the Hebrews' highway to freedom, Pharaoh's army drives with the confidence of predators. However, when the staff is raised once more, the colossal walls of water crash down with the deafening roar of thunder, engulfing both chariots and horses. Not a single survivor remains to carry news of their defeat back to the royal court. On the opposite shore, as the bodies of Egyptians wash ashore like scattered driftwood after a tempest, the people of the covenant raise their inaugural song of freedom. Tambourines ring in Miriam's hands as the women dance, and a triumphant voice rises alongside them. They march into the wilderness of Shur, carrying the bones of Joseph as their most cherished possession, while fire and cloud from heaven guide their steps towards a divinely ordained appointment at God's mountain. Behind them lie 4 centuries of servitude, extinguished in a single night of divine judgment from above. Ahead lies a 40-year period of desert wandering, destined to forge a nation from former slaves and to etch heaven's law upon stone tablets. From Sinai's smoldering peak, where thunder proclaimed the law and lightning carved commandments into stone, the covenant people carry divine fire within their hearts across vast wilderness expanses, journeying towards the land of ancient promise. When Joshua leads them across the divided waters of the Jordan and the walls of Jericho crumble under the blast of trumpets and the force of earnest prayer, the conquest sweeps across Canaan like wildfire, consuming dry stubble. Yet, the conquest remains incomplete, akin to a tapestry only partially woven upon heaven's loom. Pockets of resistance persist, scattered across the hill country and along the coastal plains. Canaanite fortresses, where bronze chariots gleam menacingly, Philistine cities, where iron weaponry sings its songs of technological superiority, and the Jebusite stronghold of Jerusalem, perched upon its rocky throne like an eagle's nest, remain beyond easy reach. Among the tribes, no overarching authority holds sway once Joshua's remains are laid to rest beside Joseph's in the hallowed ground of Shechem. Each clan settles into its allotted inheritance, while the Ark of the Sacred Covenant resides at Shiloh, attended by Levite priests whose voices lift daily sacrifices towards heaven's throne. In those days, no king reigned over the children of Abraham. Each individual acted according to what seemed right in their own eyes. Into this loosely knit confederation, trials descend like waves crashing against a crumbling seawall. The peoples whom Joshua had not utterly vanquished press back against Hebrew settlements with ever-increasing boldness, while new adversaries arise beyond the eastern banks of the Jordan and the western shores of the Great Sea. When the burden of oppression becomes unbearable, the tribes cry out to the God of their ancestors, and he, in turn, raises up deliverers, judges who skillfully combine military command, civil magistracy, and prophetic authority. Othniel of Judah is the first to answer heaven's call when Mesopotamian raiders sweep down from the north like locusts devouring the harvest. His bronze sword carves a path to freedom from a foreign yoke, while his voice proclaims divine justice to the assembled multitudes. 8 years of peace follow his victory before new threats emerge to test the covenant people's steadfastness. When the tribes once again forget their divine benefactor and turn to idols of wood and altars of stone, Eglon, king of Moab, crosses the Jordan with Ammonite allies to exact tribute from those who have forgotten the source of their strength. For 18 years, his tax collectors strip Hebrew granaries bare, and his soldiers remind the conquered that iron spears carry greater authority than ancient pledges. However, Ehud, the left-handed son of Gera from Benjamin's formidable tribe, carries more than mere tribute when he approaches Eglon's throne. Concealed beneath his robes, a cubit-long blade awaits the opportune moment when a private audience will transform into an act of divine judgment. In the cool chamber where the Moabite king receives his Hebrew vassal, bronze finds flesh with surgical precision. The deed accomplished, the judge makes his escape while confusion reigns among the guards as they discover their master's lifeless body. The horn of liberation resounds across Ephraim's hills as Ehud rallies the tribes to seize the fords of the Jordan before Moabite reinforcements can cross. That day, 10,000 enemy warriors fall beneath Hebrew bronze, with none escaping to carry news of their defeat back to their homeland. 80 years of peace follow Ehud's deliverance, but memory seldom endures as long as flesh, and the familiar pattern repeats with wearisome inevitability. New apostasy ushers in fresh oppression, as Jabin, king of Hazor, dispatches his general Sisera with 900 iron chariots to remind the covenant people that military technology often dictates political reality. For 20 years, those wheeled fortresses thunder across Canaan's plains, while Hebrew foot soldiers learn to dread the sound of bronze-rimmed wheels. In eras of hardship, when Canaanite rulers levied taxes upon fearful hamlets, leadership emerged from an unlikely quarter. Deborah, a prophetess, held court under a palm tree situated between Ramah and Bethel, administering justice with wisdom drawn from divine wellsprings. Even the senior tribal figures acknowledged the authority in her pronouncements. When the Spirit of the Almighty stirred within her spirit, she summoned Barak, son of Abinoam from Kadesh, with words that blazed like celestial fire. The opportune moment had arrived to shatter Canaanite dominance and draw Sisera, along with his formidable iron chariots, towards Mount Tabor. There, the terrain would prove advantageous for Israelite strategies over foreign technological might. 10,000 soldiers from Naphtali and Zebulun pledged to follow Barak to a decisive victory. However, Barak's reply disclosed the apprehension that iron weaponry had instilled in the hearts of the Israelites. He stated he would go only if Deborah accompanied him, and not otherwise. The prophetess assented, though her words carried a prophetic irony. The triumph would bring no renown to Barak's name, for the Almighty intended to deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. From the elevated vantage point of Mount Tabor, Israelite forces descended like an unstoppable cascade, while the heavens opened, transforming the valley of the Kishon into a marshland that engulfed the Canaanite chariots. Where iron wheels had once rumbled with oppressive power, they now spun helplessly in the mire, as Israelite spears found their intended targets. Sisera himself abandoned his chariot, fleeing on foot towards the encampment of Heber the Kenite. Yet, destiny manifested in the form of a woman, just as Deborah had foretold. Jael, wife of Heber, welcomed the fleeing commander with a hospitality that concealed a lethal intent. While he slumbered beneath the protective covering of her tent, her hammer drove a tent peg through his temple, piercing the earth below. The subsequent composition, Deborah's Victory Ode, resonated across the hillsides like resonant bronze bells, heralding divine deliverance. 40 years of tranquility followed that monumental victory. Still, the cycle persisted, as unyielding as the ocean tides and as devastating as a pestilence. A resurgence of idolatry ushered in new adversaries as the Midianites swept across the Jordan like a torrent of ruin. Their camel-mounted warriors brought destruction into the heartland of Israel with a swiftness that no infantry could match. For 7 years, these desert marauders descended during the harvest season, despoiling the land. Among those discreetly milling wheat in hidden locations, Gideon, son of Joash, threshed his grain within a wine press to conceal his activities from Midianite patrols. It was here that the angel of the Almighty found him, addressing the apprehensive farmer as a mighty warrior and commissioning him to liberate his people from their oppressors. His response was not verbal, but manifested in miraculous signs that blazed with divine fire. That night, a divine directive instructed the reluctant judge to dismantle his father's altar dedicated to Baal and fell the sacred pole standing beside it. When the townspeople discovered their shrine desecrated and demanded Gideon's execution, his father displayed a wisdom far exceeding human comprehension, suggesting that if Baal possessed true divine power, he should defend himself. When the Midianite forces poured across the Jordan like a swarm of locusts descending upon a field of grain, the Spirit of the Almighty imbued Gideon's being, and his trumpet call reverberated across the tribal territories. 32,000 men answered his summons, but a divine strategy necessitated a reduced force to ensure that the credit for victory would be attributed to heaven rather than human might. At the water's edge, a final selection was made through a straightforward test of drinking posture. Those who lapped water like canines, maintaining vigilance while satisfying their thirst, numbered only 300. Yet, These individuals formed the nucleus of heaven's chosen instrument. Armed with nothing more than trumpets, torches, and empty jars, this diminutive contingent achieved what conventional armies could not. During the Middle Watch, while a profound slumber enveloped the enemy camp, 3 divisions encircled the Midianite host. At Gideon's signal, trumpet blasts shattered the nocturnal silence, torches flared from the broken jars, and Israelite voices proclaimed victory. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks as terrified soldiers struck down their own comrades in the darkness, while those who recognized their predicament fled eastward. In the aftermath of victory, grateful tribes offered Gideon royal authority. However, the judge's response revealed an understanding that would be forgotten by subsequent generations. He declared he would not reign over them, nor would his sons, for the Almighty alone held sovereign dominion over the covenant people. Following Gideon's demise, his son Abimelech demonstrated the perils that regal ambition posed to the tribal federation. Utilizing silver pilfered from the Temple of Baal, he hired worthless mercenaries to assassinate 70 of his own relatives, thus clearing his path to kingship through bloodshed. 3 years of oppressive rule underscored the wisdom of eschewing monarchy, culminating when a woman's